Hello, and welcome to the P3 Power Boost Podcast. I'm Lisa Thomas, your host, and we're going to be speaking with real business women with real issues in real time. They still have to perform on purpose and deliver extraordinary results. Can't wait for you to meet each of our guests as they navigate the waters of success while addressing the real issues in real time. So we have Miss Sarah Young. Here we are with Sarah. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining me this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I talked a little bit about you earlier and the excitement of having you be on the podcast, specifically because I read your bio and it says that you are the owner of a virtual CFO agency that helps business owners find financial peace and generate freedom and wealth. So tell us a little bit about that mission and what that's about.
Yeah. Well, this is fun to jump right into that. So this is really, I'm a CPA by trade. So I started in accounting over a decade ago and
Mhm.
have done that for a long time. And I started the Big Four. I worked at Deloitte for 4 years, and then I went to a corporate, big company, worked my way up the ladder. And I think, sort of the catalyst for me starting my own business wasn't necessarily like this deeper mission, but I think, I was pregnant and I knew that the higher I went at my job, the more they were going to suck my time away. And I mean that, and it is the way the corporate world is, right? And so
Yeah,
I decided
yeah.
to just hang my sign out as an accountant. And as I worked with more and more business owners, I began to realize, like, oh wow, it's actually really difficult for business owners to find, really solid financial help aside from this sort of like check the box tax prep, bookkeeping, more like compliance focused work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I saw that, there was a real issue with business owners being able to actually, build wealth and like being able to pay themselves regularly out of their business, let alone like being able to save for retirement and all of that. I mean, I think the statistics, I was looking at several weeks ago at the stats on, I think it's, I forget off the top of my head, and you may know, but the number of women business owners who even make more than $100,000 in revenue is something like, what is it, 30% make more than 100,000, somewhere in that range.
Yep.
And
Mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm.
if that means 70% of women business owners make less than $100,000 in revenue, we're certainly not able to pay ourselves $100,000 or anything close to it. And so I really truly believe like the goals that most business owners have, like, they're not really about money. It's about like the way you want to live your life. But I very firmly believe that your finances enable all of that. And so we want money to be something that empowers you and not something that causes stress. So
Yes.
that's what we do.
Yeah. So my question is, why is it that you think women are not earning enough to pay themselves that $100,000? Why do you think
Oh
that's
my
the case?
gosh. Where do we even start? I think there's a lot of reasons. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's several elements to it. I think that one, I think revenue is obviously important. So being able to like generate sales. But I think once what I found personally and what I see with a lot of clients is when I got to around the $100,000 a year mark, so 8,000, 10K a month, to be able to push beyond that, I really had to like zoom out and think bigger and be able to pull myself out of the weeds. Like, for me to go from 8, 10K months to 50K, which is about where we're at now in my business, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't about doing 5 times more work. It was
Mm-hmm.
about getting, I think, really smart about what you do, understanding the numbers certainly, but I think it's about being able to like step out of the doer mode and
Mm-hmm.
really becoming what I would call, a CEO, and not just a solopreneur, not just having a job for yourself. And doing
Mm-hmm.
that requires a whole new skill set, I think. Like the skill set that gets you to being able to do 8, 10K months, I think is whatever you're good at, right? Whatever you
Right.
can sell. And then it becomes, now we've got to learn the finance skills. Now we've got to learn the leadership skills, starting
Yep.
to hire team members. There's a whole lot of mindset stuff that comes up around fear. I can't do this. I don't believe that I can do this. Like, why would people pay me for this? You got to get smart about your offers.
Yep.
And making sure the offers are profitable. And then you also have to make sure like you're doing consistent activities to generate the pipeline to be able to make the sales to support growing the team and the other investments you need to make in your business. I think it is like investments, right? This mindset of investing in your business. And I think it's really similar, in your business, women are sometimes afraid, I think, to make that investment, much like in their personal lives. I see a lot of women who want to outsource their personal finances, their investments to their partners. And I'm like, no, ma'am. Like, we're going to learn how to do this on our own, like without outsourcing it to somebody else. So I don't know if that answered the question. I think the answer is there's a lot of things.
No, I think it was fantastic, right? It covered the gambit, really, because, you're really talking about independence, right? Well, one, independence, that's one aspect of what I heard you say. We outsource a lot of different things personally, and yet we don't understand it. So, which is a huge conversation that we're going to talk about, I think, just a little bit about understanding. And I don't know why we shy away from it, but I did hear that was one of the areas. But then there's also shifting the mindset into CEO, right? Because you can generate, and particularly in your field, right? You can generate maybe 18, maybe even $20,000 a month independently. But when you start talking about expansion, that's when I heard you say you've got to move into CEO. What is that like? Say, what was that shift for you that you can point to that indicated, I'm now in CEO mode? What would you say that is? What was that shift?
I think for me, it was being able to hire a team, for one, to be able to do a lot of the day-to-day work so that things can run independently of me being there every single day to stir the pot, right?
Yep.
And so, that started with us hiring an accounting team. We've recently added to our tax team to be able to do all of the behind the scenes prep work that enables me to step in, as CEO of my business, but also as I'm the CFO for all of my clients, for me to be able to drop in as the CFO and focus on what I need to do instead of me also trying to be the bookkeeper, the tax preparer, the payroll analyst, all these things. And so I think that was one shift. I think too, understanding that it's not about doing more. I think I said that already.
Yeah.
But I think when we start running numbers with clients and when they start thinking about growing, a lot of times they think it's about making more sales and saying, okay, if I want to go from 20 to 40K a month, let's say in revenue, it's going to be about doubling my revenue.
Yes.
And I would say sometimes it is a volume game, but sometimes we also need to make sure, especially as you're growing your team, that your offers themselves are priced well, that they're highly profitable, and that you're going to be able to consistently bring in the sales. So bringing in, like, doing the pipeline activities to like continue juggling as the CEO, being able to do the marketing and the sales in addition to the customer delivery. And the other thing I think is being able to invest in the systems and processes in my business to help it run, because you can't just hire a team and put, the butt in the chair and expect it to run. You have to have the processes and systems in place to be able to even do that.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for listening to this segment of the P3 Power Boost podcast, where we discuss real issues for real business women in real time. What you are about to hear is the internal dialogue of other business women like you. Check it out.
Okay, what was my affirmation again? Stay focused. Stay focused. But you have a big meeting today. You know good and well you're not really ready for it. You're going to have to face this guy. I know he's been difficult, and I know that he's challenging. He's your COO. He's a leader. He's not performing. But how do you lead in a way that will move the needle forward? Okay, that's right. I'm supposed to be saying affirmations. I am powerful. I am extraordinary. I am one of a kind. I mean, Jesus, it's going to be a tough day. This internal chatter that many bossy business women face is what we address within the P3 Group's program, LEAP. We create a strategic plan. We support your leadership team in coaching and educating them on being extraordinary leaders. But what about you as the CEO who's challenged by the team, by the growth of the company, by the change that you're going through, as well as the financials? This and all that women face is what we address within the LEAP program. Join us at leap.thep3group.com. Great. Well, we're back with Sarah. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us again here on the P3 Power Boost podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we were just talking about what it means to be a CEO and really shifting the mindset from what it takes to maybe be $100,000 business to going into, $1 million business, multi-million-dollar business. And you were talking about, processes, systems, strategies there, and really shifting your mindset into that kind of leader, where you're being a leader that looks at your finances, you look at your process, you look at your systems. And so I wanted you to just share a little bit more about that and how that shift happened, right? I know you said that being a CEO, now you look at those things, but how did that happen for you? Was there something that went off in the brain? Did you read something? What had you start to look in those areas?
Yeah. I think there was a point, and it wasn't necessarily all at one time, but I looked up one day and I just felt like I was hitting a ceiling, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was hitting a ceiling of my own making. And so I think it was the fall of 2021. I felt really, really burned out. So I had been full-time in my business for a little over a year. Our revenue back then was about 10 to 15K a month.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was able to get a couple of part-time like bookkeeping staff people to help me, but I still just felt like I am burned out. I'm working all the time. I'm not making enough money for this to be worth it. And I just sort of realized I have to do something different than what I've been doing, because you have to shift like back to the CEO mindset. You can't have the same mindset of what gets you from 0 to 100K in revenue is not what's going to get you from 100K to 500 to $1 million. And then certainly is not what gets people from $1 million to multi-millions to 8 figures, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I just sort of realized, this isn't working. And so I'll just sort of tell you some of the things I did to shift to get to the next level in my business.
Mm-hmm.
And, with where I'm at, I'm also finding myself kind of going through another level of that, even to get from, we're at about 50K months in revenue now.
Mm-hmm.
I have a plan for 2023 to
Mm-hmm.
get us to 80 to 100K by the end of the year.
Yeah.
I feel like this is planning out my sales. I'm like, I can do this, but I also need a good mindset. I need systems. I need processes. I need my team. And my systems and processes have to include, profitable offers, and I have to consistently market those offers. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, sort of back to, I don't really, there wasn't like a day where I woke up and said, I can't do this anymore. It was just sort of slowly over time. Actually, in early 2021, I started my business as a typical CPA, tax prep, bookkeeping,
Mm-hmm.
CFO services as a consulting option, but that wasn't my primary thing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my friends who was a business coach referred me to my first ever CFO retainer client after I had just decided to make that an offer.
Okay.
And they started off paying me $4,000 a month as the retainer. And I was like, oh my goodness, like who's going to pay me $4,000?
Right.
And now, I mean, $4,000, I'm like, I've got people who pay me double that. Right.
Sure.
So that was sort of the first taste of like, oh, wow, like this is actually possible. And then throughout 2021, I started shifting, the offer structure, the price points, the systems behind, delivering on that retainer service versus tax prep and bookkeeping is very different.
Yeah.
What I needed my team to do, the deliverables that they needed, the time frame. And so I spent the whole year working on how do I sell that higher priced offer? What does my marketing need to look like? And then hiring more team support to be able to scale it up. And so by the end of 2021, I had totally pivoted to only CFO services as our main offer. And now, obviously, we've grown our business substantially that way. And I said, I feel like I'm going through yet another round of that because, for us, I feel like at about $50K a month, I'm very close to what is my capacity as a CFO for client work. And so, for me to be able to, I feel like to be a CEO, a seven-figure Sarah CEO, I feel like I'm going to have to pull myself even farther out of the day-to-day to be able to say, okay, what's it like for me to hire another CFO? That's my big 2023 thing is how do I make sure that all of our internal systems and processes, deliverables, quality control is so important for me. Yes. We're messing with people's money. Like we certainly don't want to mess that up. So, that's what I'm thinking about. And it's like, I've got to shift myself into a new level of CEO in order to be able to lead the team to execute on my plan.
Yeah, it's all about scale, right? How do you scale it? Or how do you scale yourself? How do you scale your process? How you scale all of it? And I think there was one pivotal piece that I just want to underscore. It's when you first got the CFO contract of $4,000 and you thought previously, who's going to pay me $4,000? Right?
Yeah.
I think that's pivotal because a lot of the reason that people don't go to the next level of scale and expansion is belief, right? They don't believe it. Some part of them, they really do not believe somebody's going to pay me X for this, right?
It's true.
Right. And so that, I think that's a critical piece, but I've always said, if someone's done it, it's possible. Right. Yeah. So if someone else is being paid for it, obviously it's possible. So I think that's a critical piece that you believed you could, and now you're being paid double that to some degree for that same service. And so what a great way to increase, revenue just in shifting how you think. And so we talk about mindset all the time, but what does that really mean? It's one of the reasons why I wanted you to share that because, you hear that buzzword and people are like, okay, well, how do I shift my mindset? I thought I shifted it, but nothing's happening. Right. And sometimes it really is about a different perspective and changing your belief about something. You're going to say something about
that. As you're talking about this, I remember back then, and even probably until a year ago, early 2022, I had such imposter syndrome around calling myself a CFO because where I come from, I worked at Deloitte for 4 years. I worked in large public companies. What do the CFOs look like? Not me, right?
Yep.
Not me. Yep. They're all people with way more experience, typically, old white men who that's just not my personality at all. And I still, I've got over a decade of accounting experience. I don't have the experience that they have. Like they're in their 50s and 60s. They've been doing it for 30, 40 years almost. And so I had a lot of imposter syndrome around calling myself a CFO, which then impacts the way you show up for your clients. You show up on sales calls. Doubting myself as I say, hey, our annual fee is going to be $60,000 or $80,000, whatever that is, right? And so to a degree, I think I got past that just by doing it anyways, having the doubt and doing it anyways. And then doing the reps, I think just gives my brain the data of I've actually done this. And then one of the other things I always tell people to do is if you're doubting the value that you provide to people, like sit down and go through your clients and say, what have we actually done for them?
Yes.
Right? Like really write it down. I have one client in particular. She's one of my favorite. We have been with her. Like she came in at $300,000 in revenue. In a year went to 1.2 million in revenue. Profits increased like crazy. And I'm not taking credit for that because obviously like she's the one that grew the business. So I'm like, we supported her in doing that by helping her with all of her systems, with her forecast, like all of the back end stuff. And so really sitting down and saying, what is the tangible impact I have had? Like, I can't argue with that.
Right. And at the end of the day, that's what clients want, right? They want the result, and so if Sarah, young, Sarah can do it versus someone else, right, who's had 30, 40, 50 years, but the result is the same. Now it's about marketing. right?
Well, and arguably it might even be better. So I was at this event a few months ago and I
Mhm.
met the business owners of a very well-known business, women-owned business in Charlotte.
Mhm.
And I was like, hey, I remember seeing them post back in late 2020, I think. I saw a post somewhere on their social media of like, we're official, we've hired a CFO. And so I talked to them about that. I said, oh, when I saw that post, it was among one of the many things that I was like, hey, people hire CFOs as a small business owner. And they were like, "Oh yeah, we don't really love him. Like it's a team. Their whole team is women, and their CFO is a traditional, like older white male
Mhm.
CFO." And they're like, "We dread going to meetings with him. We don't have fun with him." And I'm like, "Huh." And so that has given me, you know, just more things to think about as I think about working with my clients. Of like, I can do the same things they can do, but I could do it in a way that's more relatable to my clients, many of whom are women, moms. Like, I totally understand what your life is like and what you have going on behind the scenes.
Yes, for sure, for sure. And you're really changing the game of the image of what CFO can look like. We talked about earlier too that women are outsourcing sort of their finances, and one of the reasons, oh my God, right? Like one of the reasons I think is one is unfamiliar territory and not something they fully maybe grasp. And some women do, don't get me wrong, some women do. And I'm curious in your, just kind of in your moving around in your world, why is that? Why are women shying away from, I mean, there's so much power in numbers, right? In the
Oh,
money
yeah.
and the finances. So why are women shying away from that? What do you think?
I mean, I think there's a ton of reasons. One, I think, is self doubt. And I think a lot of us have been told, math is not your thing. Math is not your strong suit, honey. Don't worry about it. You'll just skate by in math. And you
Mm-hmm.
associate money with math. So
Yep.
it's like, yeah, I mean, yes, there's math involved, but it's really not math. Um, I grew up and I wasn't taught about money stuff outside of what a mortgage was. I mean, my
Mm-hmm.
parents, like, they gave me, when I got my first job, I had my own checking account. So I learned how to balance a checkbook and all that stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
investing, like the big picture topics, we just associate with, you know, rich people. And if I don't identify as a quote unquote rich person, because I grew up in a very middle class household, like certainly didn't want for anything, but also we were not wealthy. It wasn't like we were going on vacation all the time to these whatever. Anyways, if I
Yeah.
don't identify as that, then it's going to be hard for me to say, well, I'm going to do these things. Like I'm going to become that person. I actually have a client that comes to mind. She was a teacher. And so she
Mm-hmm.
was a teacher for probably 10, 15 years, salaries 30, 40, $45,000, right? Like peanuts for what you get, which actually was a teacher for 2 years before I went back to get my master's. So like, I know this is the hardest job I've ever had in my
Oh my
life.
God. Yeah.
So she went out a few years ago and started a consulting business doing, training and coaching around different elements of, literacy and like leading your team of teachers, right, for different school districts. And very, very quickly, well surpassed anything she ever, like her tax bill is more than her salary was as a teacher,
Wow.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is in the span of just a few years. And we first started working together and I got access to her financials. She had something like $80,000 in cash just in her business account. And her husband had a 401k. She had a peanuts in her, old account from being a teacher. She was putting all of her extra money, either hoarding it in cash in her account, or she was plowing extra into 529 accounts for her kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, but you have got to take care of yourself, right? And so the reason I bring this one up is because I've seen a lot of so now she's got an automatic transfer into her her solo 401k for one.
Oh,
Like
great.
we've gone
Yeah.
that far at least.
Yes.
But, first it was, oh, I've got to talk to my husband about what we want to invest in. And the husband didn't want to make investments because the stock market's too volatile. And they're like, well, maybe we should just keep putting money into our 529s and instead of, I've got my retirement over here. And I'm like, what happens if you get divorced later? Will you have retirement? I don't know.
Right.
Are your kids going to be taken care of? Are they going to have to financially support you when you retire because you don't have any money of your own? Like things like that. And so first it was sort of, I think, outsourcing again, like, I'm just not good at this. My husband runs it. I'm going to ask him. And then I kept working on her over and over for the course of several months until, she's like, I'm just going to do it on my own. I'm not going to wait for him to give me permission. And like what it was that changed, I don't know, outside of having somebody say, you can do this, you deserve this. You don't need to take care of your kids and everybody else before you take care of yourself. Yep. And in fact, like, you can take care of your kids by taking care of yourself financially, to get her to eventually, get to that place.
Yeah, no, I think it's so great what you say. We hear it all the time. Put the mask on yourself first, right? We hear that all the time, but we don't associate it with money, right? We just don't. We're nurturers. We're going to take care of everyone before we take care of ourselves, and before you know it, we're in a peculiar situation when it arises, and then we go, "Whoa, how did this happen?" But to your point, I think voices like ours, voices like yours, that begins to open up a new way of thinking about it makes all the difference. Because you're right. I mean, women avoid it all the time. It's not, and not all of them. And I want our listeners to know there are women out there that are really on top of their money, but there are also some that are not, right? And so we want to speak to those women so that they start to have some authority and agency over their money. Within the P3 group, what we notice is that there's a lack of understanding of the financials and the power in those reports.
I mean, we didn't even go there yet. Oh my gosh.
You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, in your business, how is it that you're not really intimately related to those reports, your profit and loss statement, your balance sheets? And, how is it that you're not intimately related and understand those numbers and equity and what that means? And, so that's another critical area, and most important one for us, because we teach women to really understand that, which obviously your services aid in that kind of understanding. But that's also an area that's really lacking for women in business, I believe.
I think it's the same of sales and gross profit and cost of sales and operating income and taxable income and all the jargon and all the things. It can be overwhelming if you don't have a basic understanding of it. And so you tell yourself, I've got better things to do. I'm not going to worry about this. And, you just think, hey, if I put my head in the sand, just kind of keep doing what I'm doing over here, it'll eventually work out. So no, I agree. I think it's all the same thing. We tend to outsource the responsibility to other people, either because we're afraid of, maybe it will be hard if you look at it and you just go do other things that you think are more fun. Or I think there's a lot of guilt sometimes too, of like, either I've managed my finances poorly and I'm afraid to see that. Or on the flip side, like back to my client example, who's a teacher, like thinking of her tax bill is what her salary used to be.
Yes.
Like, really think about that and think about like who, and I'm putting words in her mouth, but like, who am I to be making this much money when all of my teacher friends are still making what they're making?
Right.
And so then again, we're like gonna just not do anything finance related. We're just gonna like put it off because there's so much guilt and negative emotion associated with it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times what I ask clients when there's this resistance to looking at finances, I say, what is the purpose of the money that you make? Why did you start this business? Because you love to help people, because you thought this was fun, or whatever the reason. Like, really, when you make money from this business, what is the purpose of it? And most of the time I get this like deer in headlights look, because I've never thought about it. So I'm like, is the purpose to fund your retirement? Is the purpose to allow you to retire early? Is it to allow you to leave your kids an inheritance? Or I can't remember if I've said this already, but like one of the things I'm proudest of in 2022 was my income stabilizing enough so my husband could quit his job and he didn't have to do the corporate rat race anymore. Is that the purpose of it? Is it to start a foundation or make huge donations? Like, why are we here? And with that as the ultimate like motivation, then let's figure out, well, how can we make this happen? So I think sometimes tying it back to like beyond the guilt, what is the greater purpose here? And why are you doing this is really, really important.
Oh, for sure. And I agree with you 100%. We go down that line of questioning as well, right? Obviously why you want to start a business, but ultimately, what is the business going to provide and what is this revenue going to really provide you? because there's freedom in it. I mean, at the end of the day, that's another thing. Like, money is taboo for some people. If I can't brag about I made a lot of money and all these other things that comes along with it. But the truth of the matter is, there's opportunity when you have it, right? And so when you have it, what do you really want to do with it? And so, to your point, it sort of anchors their purpose and why, but it also anchors them to then make some different choices and decisions along the way. And so, what great work you're doing, Sarah. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I know our audience is going to get great value from what you shared. And thanks for being a great partner with us and making an impact in the lives of women in business. So congratulations for all the work that you're doing. And I know that you're going to make that 8 figures, if not 2023, certainly 2024. And so we're holding the light up for you that you achieve all your goals. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, I appreciate it. And I'll just send sort of one final plug if you're listening and you're thinking, where do I get started to really get a handle on my numbers? I have a whole podcast all about exactly that. So go listen to the Profit and Prosper podcast. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, we talk about finance stuff, but in a fun way. One of my clients gave me the tagline, Sarah makes finance fun. And so I try to educate people, help you increase your financial literacy, both in your business and with, building your wealth, making investments. So I would go check that out.
Yes, definitely check out our podcast. Again, Sarah, has been wonderful. Any final thoughts? Any last thing that you want to say? Nugget that you want to leave these powerful women with?
Oh, that's it. I have a lot of nuggets. The one last thing I'll say, somebody asked me this on another podcast interview I did recently. She said, what is the biggest mistake people make with their finances? Mm-hmm. And I'll leave on this. My answer is not they messed up their bookkeeping or they messed up their tax returns or they got a letter from the IRS. Mm-hmm. The answer is the biggest mistake you can make is not addressing it, is not being actively, involved in managing your money. I think we've talked about that in this episode. So yep. I think just get started. I think doing something is way better than doing nothing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great nugget. And I'm excited for them to hear from Sarah. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you.
Scaling your business requires innovation sometimes. You have to learn to color outside of the lines. It means you have to take a leap into unfamiliar territory. So many businesses, just like yours, are taking the leap. Join us so you can leap into profits. Leap.thep3group.com